You are paying for fertilizer and eggs every week while throwing away the exact materials that produce both for free. And this is not an accident. This is the result of a system that deliberately separated animals from gardens because animals close the loop and make you independent. John Seymour spent decades proving that 8 hens in 10 square feet will produce more value than $100 of store-bought inputs. But almost nobody does this because we have been taught that gardens are about plants, when the truth is that gardens without animals are just decoration. They look nice, but they cannot sustain themselves. They require constant injections of money for fertilizer and constant purchases of eggs and meat. And meanwhile, you are throwing away kitchen scraps that could feed chickens and garden waste that could become compost and chicken manure that could activate that compost. So you are literally paying money to get rid of the materials that would make you self-sufficient if you just had the biological engine to transform them. Here is what that biological engine looks like. It is 8 hens in a mobile unit that occupies 10 square feet. And those hens take your kitchen scraps and garden waste, which have almost no nitrogen, and they transform those materials in a matter of hours into manure with high nitrogen content. And no chemist or biologist has ever been able to explain how animals do this, but they do it. And that manure activates your compost pile, so it breaks down in weeks instead of months. And meanwhile, those same 8 hens are laying eggs every day. So from the same 10 square feet, you are getting the two most expensive inputs that a garden requires, which are nitrogen-rich fertilizer and protein-rich eggs. And you are getting both of them for free from materials you would otherwise throw away. And this is what Seymour meant when he said that chickens may well make the difference between just growing a few vegetables and true self-sufficient gardening. This is why chickens change everything. The system is called the chicken tractor method. It was developed at the Santa Barbara Urban Farm Project in California, and it works like this. You build a mobile run that is 10 square feet with a night shelter attached and wheels so 2 people can move it. You keep 8 hens in this unit and you place it over one of your garden beds that you have previously sown with rye or another quick-growing grazing crop. And the hens spend 2 to 3 weeks on that bed doing 4 things simultaneously. They eat the grazing crop, they manure the soil, they scratch it deeply, which aerates it better than any tool, and they destroy every weed and eat every pest insect. So when those 2 to 3 weeks are over, you move the tractor to the next bed, and the first bed is completely transformed. It is what Seymour called well-manured and weed-free, and you plant your vegetables in that bed, and they grow faster than anything you have ever seen because the soil is full of nitrogen and air and completely free of pests and weeds. The feeding system is brilliant. It is called the Worthington method, and Seymour said you give the hens ample green stuff, which means a lot of green stuff, not just cabbage. You give them whole grain, which is wheat if you can get it, and you give them high-protein food like fish meal, and then you let them eat as much as they want, of whatever they want, and they will balance their own diet. They will not overeat, and they will lay plenty of eggs because chickens are smart enough to regulate themselves if you give them the components. And what they eat in practice is about 4.5 ounces of wheat per day per hen and less than half an ounce of fish meal. And for the green stuff, you use every surplus vegetable from your garden, every overripe lettuce, every Brussels sprout plant after harvest, every bit of kale or comfrey. So you're feeding the materials that cost you nothing. Here is the key thing most people miss. Chicken manure is not just fertilizer, it is the activator that makes your entire compost system work. Because compost piles need nitrogen to break down organic matter. And without enough nitrogen, the pile just sits there for months. But when you add chicken manure, the pile heats up immediately and breaks down in weeks. And this is critical because it means your garden is no longer limited by how much compost you can buy or how long you have to wait for it to break down. Your garden is only limited by how much organic matter you can collect. And since the chickens are eating your kitchen scraps and garden waste and converting them into manure that activates the compost that goes back into the garden, you have created a closed loop where nothing leaves your property and nothing needs to come in. This is the loop that changes everything. Here is what you get from 8 hens in 10 square feet. First, you get eggs. And Seymour said a constant supply of good fresh eggs, which means if you are buying a dozen eggs per week, that is 52 dozen per year. And at current prices, that is $150 per year that you no longer spend. Second, you get manure. And 8 hens produce enough manure to activate all the compost you can make in a home garden. And if you are buying bagged fertilizer or compost, that is at least another $100 per year saved. Third, you get pest control because the hens eat every insect in the bed. And Seymour said that in an organic garden, beetles eat up to half the carrot fly eggs, but chickens eat all the insects. So you are saving money on pest control. Fourth, you get weed control because the tractor system destroys all weeds in each bed. So you are saving hours of weeding time. And fifth, you get soil aeration because the hens scratch deeply, which is better than any broad fork. So you are getting 5 outputs from the same 10 square feet. The daily routine is absurdly simple. Every morning you open the night shelter and the hens come out. You give them their grain and protein supplement, which takes 2 minutes. You give them kitchen scraps, which takes 1 minute. You collect eggs, which takes 1 minute. You check their water, which takes 1 minute. So total time is 5 minutes per day. And every 2 to 3 weeks, you move the tractor to the next bed, which takes 10 minutes with 2 people. So your total time investment is 5 minutes per day, plus 10 minutes every few weeks. And Seymour said, this is the work of minutes a day. And in exchange for that, you are getting $300 per year in outputs that you would otherwise be buying. Plus, you are eating eggs from hens that are living outdoors, eating fresh greens and insects, which are better eggs than you can buy at any store. Let's talk about economics, but not the kind you're used to. Let's talk about the economics of your backyard, because the numbers, when you look at them, are absurd. What if you're spending $150 a year on eggs, $100 on fertilizer, $50 on pest control? That's $300 walking out of your wallet every single year. Now, what if I told you the initial cost to stop that bleeding is about $200 for a small mobile chicken coop, a tractor, and maybe $100 for the hens themselves? You break even in 1 year. After that, it's pure profit forever. And this isn't even counting the real value. It's not counting the hours you save on weeding and breaking up compacted soil. It's not counting the massively increased yield you get from having nitrogen-rich, well-aerated, pest-free garden beds. The real return is much, much higher, and the system just runs. When your hens get old after 2 or 3 years, you can butcher them for meat. An old writer named Seymour swore they make the most excellent soup. Then you just replace them with new hens and the cycle continues uninterrupted. This isn't some newfangled idea. The historical evidence is overwhelming. Seymour wrote about the old country gardens in England back before industrial agriculture paved over everything. He said nearly all country people kept hens, their chickens, their rabbits, their pigs. They gave an enormous fertility to their gardens. The result was that these small plots of land were unbelievably productive, bursting with life. These people were growing more food per square foot than most modern gardeners can even imagine. And they were doing it without buying a single bag of fertilizer, not one input. They had animals to close the loop. And of all the animals, the chickens were the most important. They were the easiest to keep and produced the most value for the tiny amount of space they required. It leads to a stunningly simple conclusion. Gardens don't fail because of bad soil. They fail because they have no animals. Here's the closed-loop system that makes this so powerful. Your kitchen produces scraps, vegetable peels, leftover grains, stale bread. Those scraps go to the chickens. The chickens, these tiny biological converters, turn them into 2 things: eggs, which go right back to your kitchen, and manure, which goes to your compost pile. Your garden produces its own waste. Old plants, surplus zucchini. That waste also goes to the chickens or directly to the compost. That compost pile, which might normally sit there slowly decomposing, is super activated by the high nitrogen chicken manure and breaks down incredibly fast. The finished, rich compost goes onto your garden beds. The beds produce more food for your kitchen and more waste for the chickens, and the loop just continues forever. You're no longer buying fertilizer or eggs or pest control because the system is feeding itself. This is what Seymour meant when he said that to keep chickens any other way, locked in a static pen separate from the garden, is cruel. It breaks the cycle of nature that is so deeply beneficial to the garden. So how do you start? It's simpler than you think. You need about 10 square feet for a chicken tractor. You can build it yourself with some basic lumber and chicken wire or find plans online. The absolute key is that it must be mobile with wheels and a handle. Then you need about 8 hens. You can buy laying hens that are already producing, so you get that return on investment immediately. And finally, you need at least 3 garden beds in rotation. This is crucial. You always have one bed ready for the chickens, one bed the chickens are actively working, and one bed you are planting or harvesting from. And here's a pro tip. Sow each bed with a cover crop like rye about a month before the chickens arrive. It gives them something green to eat and jump starts the whole process. Now, if you have a little more space and don't like the idea of moving a tractor every few days, there's an alternative. The Balfour method. It's named after Lady Eve Balfour, one of the pioneers of the organic farming movement. It's brilliant. You have 3 distinct areas. First, a central scratching pen. This isn't just a pen, it's your compost pile. You fill it with all your garden waste, kitchen scraps, and straw. The hens spend most of their time in here scratching through it, eating insects, shredding the material, and breaking it all down with their manure. Every few weeks, you empty it, and you have what Seymour called magnificent compost. The second and third areas are 2 grazing pens, fenced-off patches of grass and clover. You rotate the hens between these 2 pens every couple of weeks. While they graze one down, the other regenerates. The result is your hens always have fresh greens, and you are producing massive amounts of the best compost you've ever seen. The key insight in all of this is that chickens are not an accessory to your garden. They are the engine that makes it work. See, most modern gardens are fundamentally limited by one thing: nitrogen. You can only grow as much as you can supply nitrogen for, and nitrogen is expensive, whether you buy it as chemical fertilizer or in bags of compost. But chickens produce nitrogen for free. They take materials that have almost no nitrogen, kitchen scraps, weeds, grass, and through a kind of biological magic, they concentrate it in their manure. This means that with chickens, your garden is no longer limited by nitrogen. It is only limited by space and sunlight. And since the chicken tractor method uses the vertical space above your beds, you aren't even losing growing space. You are adding a nitrogen-producing factory layer right on top of your existing garden. Without animals, gardening is just decoration. This is what true self-sufficiency looks like. It isn't about growing a few tomatoes and then buying everything else. It's about creating a system where every output from one part becomes an input for another part, where nothing is wasted, where you aren't constantly sending money out of your home to buy things you could be producing yourself. The backyard chicken system is the simplest, most elegant way to achieve this. In just 10 square feet with 8 hens and maybe 5 minutes of your time per day, you are closing the loop between your kitchen, your garden, and your food supply. You are getting free fertilizer, free pest control, and fresh eggs forever. And that is exactly what Seymour meant when he said that chickens may well make the difference between just growing a few vegetables and true self-sufficient gardening. If this story changes the way you look at your backyard and the potential for true independence, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history and methods they tried to bury. Start closing your own loop today. The next treasure of self-sufficiency will be revealed soon.